This is a forum for anyone interested in active travel, whether you're a campaigner, practitioner, academic, journalist, politician, or just an interested person. Everybody is welcome. And we'd love to hear from you, as we always say, if you have an idea that you'd like to present. And you can get in touch with us at ideaswithbeers@gmail.com. So tonight we've got Bob Davis with our weekly news update, followed by Naseem Akhtar from the Saheli Cycling Club in Birmingham, who's going to talk about supporting women to learn to cycle. And then we have Kirsty Lewin, who's going to talk about the campaign Our Streets, Our Nights in Edinburgh.
Is Transport in the Time of COVID update, 8th of March, International Women's Day. Happy International Women's Day to you. We've got a new address. You can email me at that for any information you want to, or stuff to find out, any inquiries or whatever on the news updates. Otherwise, go to our new address. You should find the website is kind of easy to use. It's ideaswithbeers.co.uk. Let us know how you're getting on with that. Okay. So for International Women's Day, I was thinking of, like, you know, the thousands of inspirational women and millions of women doing cycling and whatever. So I came across this thread of women on Moltons. Moltons were a very sort of fashionable type thing being pushed in the 60s, and they came back more recently with a different design, a way of making the so-called shopping bike more interesting, more attractive to women. So here are a few women riding Moltons. There's Susanna York back in the 60s, note the Spaniel. Here's the woman, I think her name is, I forget her name, she is Uhura in Star Trek. There's Shirley Eaton with a couple of rolls of spaghetti, and there is Nina Simone outside Buckingham Palace. Right, so there's women on Moltons, bringing in some stuff from Kiev from the war, because it's so important. It does hang over everything. And again, I'm doing this, showing solidarity with them by a picture of the president of Ukraine on a bike, and also one of the Klitschko brothers is the mayor of Kiev and goes to meetings by bike. I'm going to mention this for another week or two. I've been trying to get some of these stickers, but they have been seen in Scotland. That's actually a bit too wide for a lot of bikes, but if anybody's got them and is sending them around, do publicize. This is something I picked up, the electricity costs of digital adverts. You know, you see these great big boards around now. This is from Adblock Bristol. Double-sided electrical advertising spaces like these use 4 times as much electricity as the average UK household per year, and even bigger ones as much as 36 per year. So a lot of them are in the public realm and on street space, so do be aware of that. And I mentioned this last week, but it's important, the IPCC report, and it's tremendously important, and there's a reference in the reading list a bit later. Mentioned this also last week, but it's something you should, it's crucial, nobody left behind. Inclusive cities in a low car future. There's the link. Yeah, so there's the link for Nobody Left Behind. Nothing more in terms of new things to read from last week on this page. But here I've got, do go to the Essential Evidence web page. Comes from the Transport Research Institute at Napier University, run by Professor Adrian Davis, who's been producing essential evidence one-side sheets for some years. Always worth a trawl through them. And there's a very interesting job at Transport Action Network. We had one of the people a couple of weeks ago, and it's quite a reasonably paid job working for them. So do take a look at that if you're interested in doing a job for sustainable and healthy transport. Cycle City Conference, 5th, 6th of July. Right, in the UK, this is from East Renfrewshire. There's been the early removal of temporary lane segregation on the Ayr Road and Fenwick Road, and Cycling UK is raising a bit of a fuss about it. Do go to their webpage there to find out what you can do about it. In Portsmouth, interesting that the Portsmouth Council has actually got involved with close passing policing, and I don't know how exactly they're going to be working with the police on that, but they've said do contact us. They give a link if you've been close passed at particular locations. I think all local authorities should be doing that. LCC in London do feed stuff through to Cycle Safety Team, and I put links to Cycle Safety Team because they do a bit of policing of close passing. It should be done by the local authority in concert with the police, working together on that. I mentioned this from Oxfordshire, the good plans for the future for Oxford, but at the same time, there's a big road planned for running through Oxfordshire. In Newcastle, Sally passed me this. There's some filtered permeability there in Fenham. There you go. And one of the councillors has been quite positive about that. I don't know if Mark Strong wants to say anything about UK capability funding. Maybe we'll leave this until after I've finished. In London, there was a big protest at Holborn over yet another junction death. That was the protest last week. In Camden, the Arlington Road LTN there is being made permanent. In Islington, here again, some very high quality monitoring. I put that up last week, but do go to see what Islington and Camden and Lambeth do in terms of monitoring of the effects of their LTNs. In Hackney, here's a report saying a quarter of Hackney residents saying they're walking or cycling more following low traffic neighbourhoods being implemented. And finally, we have Kiev in 2019. There's some women cycling around in a parade in Kiev. I hope they can do that again sometime. And there's some nice graphics from 2018. I hope you don't mind me putting up stuff from the conflict, because it is important and it is linked very much up to sustainability.
Just a bit of data work that Havering Cyclists has been doing. We put in some freedom information requests to the Met Police. So this doesn't cover the City of London. So you can see for yourself on the screen, we asked 5 questions. And this is about reported traffic incidents involving basically motor vehicles and other road users. So you can see the 5 questions there. I'll post a link in the chat afterwards, so you can actually download the data, which includes the Met's raw data in answering the questions and some of the analysis we've done by borough. So any borough reps can have a look at it for themselves. So we looked at 2018, 19 and 20. We haven't asked for 21's figures yet. I suspect they're not available just yet anyway. So the figures you see there are the numbers of reported incidents involving a motor vehicle and another road user of any description. So 18, 19, fairly consistent at 70,000. Drop off in 2020, probably due to COVID. The highest borough category was unknown. So that was nearly 8,000. And the actual borough with data was Croydon as the next highest. So there's a big data gap in terms of the police recording the location or the borough that these things are taking place in. In terms of these crashes, how many involved cyclists? So again, 18, 19, fairly consistent, but 2020 there was a rise. And then we've pulled out some borough data. So in 18, 19, 20, you can see the lowest percentage where the cyclist was a victim against the total for that borough. So that's on a per borough basis. You might expect some of the boroughs to be low because there's low numbers of cyclists. Enfield maybe is a bit of a strange one there. But yeah, you can see the data for yourself. So 2020, the lowest was Barking and Dagenham, probably because nobody cycles there. And Richmond was the highest, probably because a lot more people are getting out into some of the parks in the area. And at the bottom, there's the Pan London data, which again, reasonably consistent. A lot of this stuff is rounded up. The data geeks can download this and play around with some of the stats for themselves. This is quite interesting. So we asked about incidents that ended up with the driver being retrained versus being prosecuted. So you can see the Pan London figures, fairly standard. 5% of incidents drivers get sent for retraining. And then there's the boroughs there. So some of the boroughs, nobody getting sent to be retrained, and others fairly high. And then in terms of potential prosecutions, and the reason it's potential is the police don't have the data coming back in actual convictions. So again, 18, 19, 20, lots of boroughs below the average, lots of boroughs above the average. So again, a lot of inconsistency there perhaps. So you're looking at maybe on average a total of about 15% of drivers in incidents getting a sanction at the end of it. So there's a lot of incidents and very little outcome maybe. In terms of our conclusions so far, potential prosecutions running at twice the number of retraining courses. So in terms of the things that go forward, are they a lot more serious, needing a sort of sanction through the courts than a retraining? But it's really, really variable by borough and year. And that's probably the main thing to take away from this, that there needs to be more consistency and more deployment across London. I'll put this link in the chat. You can download the raw data as an Excel file and play around for yourself. Thank you very much.
Hi there. Sorry, yeah, I just wanted to add a bit to Bob's roundup. Just to say that I'm from the Walk Ride Heatons group in Greater Manchester. To say that as of last night, we are only the first in Stockport and the second in Greater Manchester to get some progress on our active neighbourhood scheme. That's LTN for everybody else. So yeah, we are now looking at a permanent scheme being designed for a small part of our overall area, but it's a concrete step towards a permanent scheme.
Funding announcements for maintenance and local transport planning have been announced as well. As I tweeted about that a few weeks ago, it's a formula, the maintenance allocation, these are all highway authorities outside London. The maintenance allocation is a formula-based allocation. So you get so much per mile of road. And the formula was developed in 2014, and it doesn't include cycle routes or pavements. So that you could have miles and miles and miles of cycle routes and pavements, and you don't get any extra funding. It's all weighted towards A roads. So that doesn't mean it has to be spent on the roads that the council gets it for. But if you're a lazy council or a lazy officer, you'd say, the formula says it's per mile of road, so therefore you should spend it on per mile of road. It would take a braver council to say, well, we got it for roads and we're going to spend it on maintaining footways or cycle tracks. I can find the link for that announcement and the background to it, and I'll put it in the chat.
I'm Kirsty Lewin, based up in Edinburgh on the beach here in Portobello, and I coordinate Spokes Porty, which is a local Spokes Lothian group. And my claim to fame is that I have survived being run over by a lorry, and it was on a Moulton. The Moulton is no more. So I'm just going to run you quickly through, hang on a tick, once this is up. Yeah, okay. So run you through a new campaign in Edinburgh by a group of women called the Infra Sisters. So that's our logo on the left, and our night rides are called Our Streets, Our Nights. And for those of you who know Edinburgh, you might recognise Edinburgh Castle there in the background. And if you have a quick look at the bikes, you'll see that they're fairly inclusive. So we've tried to fit in most kinds of cycle. So the campaign is pretty straightforward. It's riding for nighttime infrastructure that's safe and comfortable for women and girls. So next slide, please. Yeah, so with every good story, there's always an inciting incident. So this was an incident that happened to me, not particularly serious actually, in October last year, coming down what's called the Innocent Paths. You can see it in daylight here on the right. It's an old railway bed. It's well lit. It's got a nice smooth surface, but it's extremely isolated. And there's hardly anyone on it at night. There's no escape routes. So I was cycling down that about 10 o'clock at night. There was a guy in front of me on his bike with no lights, and he vanished about 50 meters ahead of me. So I was pretty unnerved, and I eventually caught up with him as he popped out of the bushes, probably having a pee or something, and then he tooted off. So nothing happened, but it was frightening. And so I tweeted that tweet on the 4th of October, and then thought about it for a couple of days and thought maybe we should do some kind of Reclaim the Streets cycle ride, and got hundreds of replies via Twitter and via DMs. So next slide, please. So just a quick context. So those of you who don't know Edinburgh, we have almost no on-road protected cycle infrastructure before COVID. During COVID, we got some spaces for people, so temporary cycle lanes that are protected with defenders and bollards. We do have extensive off-road routes on railway beds. They're very, very lovely during the day, but at night they're pretty unpleasant. They're isolated, limited escape routes, and they suffer from a lot of antisocial behaviour and assaults. Both men and women have been assaulted at night and during the day. And so women have to, well, everyone, but particularly women, have to choose between dangerous drivers or people like myself who've been under the wheels of a lorry, or these isolated paths. So it's a really difficult dilemma. And also at this time, you'll remember very sadly that there was a lot of discussion around male violence against women, particularly women who'd been murdered. Sabina Nessa, Sarah Everard, Nicole Smallman and Biba Henry were just 4 people that were very sadly in the media at that time. Next slide, please. So all of these people that got together on Twitter, I gathered them together. We didn't know each other, and we decided that we would have a night ride, and we selected the last day of the United Nations 16 Days of Activism Against Gender-Based Violence. We agreed a name of the ride, which was Light Up the Night, which turned out to be an error. Can talk about that later. And then we agreed that we would have 3 very simple asks in relation to women and girls' safety cycling at night. So that is there. It's actually been slightly tweaked there, but it's basically prioritising safe and comfortable on-road cycle infrastructure protected from traffic on well-lit direct routes, providing well-signed routes which are permeable and always have a way out with good connections to other streets, and providing routes which use natural surveillance where possible. And what's really important about this is that we're calling on councillors, not the council, because the current council has pretty good plans, but like a lot of quite well-motivated councils around the country, there are 2 sort of big issues. One is the opposition, where things get really bogged down, and the other problem are delays through regulatory processes. Next slide, please. So I don't know how many of you have ever organised a big ride through a city, but it's a logistical nightmare, especially somewhere like Edinburgh. So we had a very detailed project plan, and this is all being done just by a lot of women who don't really know each other, and all volunteers, all who have other things to do in the daytime and at night. We got a logo and graphic design done by one of the volunteers. We recruited and trained marshals, volunteers through critical mass and through the COP26 rides. Just went to critical mass and grabbed people, basically. We recce'd the route several times, and the most important lesson from doing the recce's was doing the recce on the same night of the week at the same time that the ride is going to be. That's really essential. And also checking the council's website for unexpected roadworks. Did a very detailed risk assessment. We invited everyone. We pushed out on social media. We put an invite out on Eventbrite and Facebook. We invited the police at the last minute, and we were going to have one police officer on a bike, but he couldn't come because of COVID. And of course, we did the usual press, and that's the poster on the right there that you can see. Next slide, please. So just here, just 4 pictures. It was really an amazing night. 170 people came. You'll see on the left there, that's us going down one of the iconic streets, the Marshall in the pale blue tabard there. On the right, we're going through Hollywood Park, which is normally open to traffic. Some little girls on the left. And then on the right there, some volunteers had lit up Jawbone Walk in the meadows, especially for us coming in. So it was a real carnival atmosphere, and people had an amazing time. There were a lot of people in the city that night, pedestrians waving and smiling and sort of dancing to us. And most of the drivers were really welcoming and friendly. And we had a couple of very senior politicians came along from the local authority. It's a coalition, and we had both parties represented. So it was genuinely felt to be a fantastic success. And at the end of it, everyone said, when's the next one? Next slide, please. So we got lots of media coverage, I think because it looked like such an amazing spectacle. We got some pre-event radio. We were on local television, on STV Edinburgh, Free to View television, in all the local papers, in the Daily Record, MSN News, lots and lots of social media activity. And I wrote a blog 2 or 3 days later, and through the blog, actually, we picked up the BBC, although in the end they didn't run the story. So it looked really good, and particularly coming past the castle. So you can't see it that well, but it looked amazing because the castle was lit up. So having some iconic buildings to cycle past is a good thing. Next slide, please. So afterwards, we did a debrief and talked a lot about bits and pieces around the route and what the marshals did and didn't do. We rebranded away from Light Up the Night to move it away from just being about lighting. So we're now called the Infra Sisters, and we renamed the ride to Our Streets, Our Nights. So you'll see the branding there on the tabards. We've got about 10, probably about 10 of those tabards to use. We've got a website which is not quite up and running. And the next ride is on the 11th of March. It's this Friday for International Women's Day week. We are advertising on Eventbrite and Facebook. And also we've done a lot of expanded promotion with leaflets and posters. And I think at the moment we've got about 125 people signed up with another 50 odd interested. So we're hoping to have over 200. And should say that because we've done it once, we're a bit more confident on route choice now. So we've gone for bigger, more complex streets in the city. And last slide, I think. So where to next? So I think every campaign obviously faces these issues. Some people have wanted to expand this into something bigger. My preference is just to stick to the rides. To keep it really focused. We'll probably do 3 to 4 rides a year maximum, only do them in the winter months because it looks much better. It's a proper spectacle. In the middle of summer, you're not going to really see the lighting, and so there'll be nothing to see really. But there's a choice about what we want to do there. Having the tabards means we can turn up at other events and keep the brand profile high, so critical mass, Pedal on Parliament, that sort of thing. As ever, we've got capacity issues, so everyone's a volunteer and people come and go, and the rides take major logistical effort and require quite a lot of confident, experienced women marshals, but we're building capacity around that. And finally, just to say that you can do this really on the cheap. So the first one cost nothing at all, no money was spent. The second one, we've probably spent about £120 on tabards, the website, and some printing, and we've had a generous donation from Spokes Lothian. So that's me. Thank you for listening.
That's really brilliant. It is a huge amount of work just to organise the ride, but it's all of the kind of campaigning aspects around it that I think is a huge achievement to get that message across. I think we will have 5 minutes for questions now, and then we'll move on to Naseem, and then maybe we'll come back to have a kind of a discussion with everyone, if you're able to stay, Kirsty, till the end. I'm going to go first and ask a question, which is, what's the feedback been? Do you feel like, I mean, it's probably early days, but do you feel like you've made any impact on councillors?
So we know, so I don't want to talk about particular political parties, but we've seen at least one, because we've got the election coming up, at least one councillor has picked it up and it's on her campaigning leaflet. So that's really good. And councillors are talking about it. And there was, although not lots of councillors didn't come, they were commenting on social media and supporting it. So, and there is a general interest about women's safety in the city. So it seems to be a campaign that quite a few people can get behind. Yeah, so we haven't really had much trolling, not yet, anyway. Yeah, and what's been amazing is that a lot of women who came on the first ride had never dared to cycle in the city on their own before at night. Unfortunately, we haven't got enough capacity for feeder rides. We've got one feeder ride, but we haven't got any. So some people are not coming because they can't get to the ride. Yeah,
and I guess particularly if you're having it in the evening, that it just really shows what the problem is, doesn't it? And I think, because I mean, we're similar in Newcastle. We've got a lot of these kind of old wagon ways that are great cycling routes in the day, and actually not always in the day though either. That don't feel safe, and you need kind of on-road infrastructure, don't you? Right, who else has it? I think somebody asked in the chat, was that Roxanne, asked about insurance?
We didn't insure. We have in the last one, and we aren't insuring this time. It's funny, we had a discussion about it yesterday. We'll have to see what happens at the next one. To be honest, we didn't think about insurance first time. Yeah.
I think because I think there's that, because I noticed you invited the police, so they obviously didn't say, why have you not told us this is happening? They were obviously quite supportive.
They're fine. So they're sending 2 police officers on bikes to the ride on Friday, and we're going to have them at the back. So we think that's where they'll be the most effective, because that's where the most aggressive driving is, at the back. But we had very few problems last time, really maybe one taxi driver who was a bit hostile, but actually everyone was fine. Yeah.
Hi, sort of question, but possibly this is for chat later, is we, back in the 80s, we had Reclaim the Night, which was, after the Yorkshire Ripper, really. Personally, I feel safer on my bike than walking, so I would go out at night on my bike. And I just wondered if anyone ever talked about the fact that teenage boys are more at risk than young women, statistically. So if, maybe one could broaden it out to anybody who feels vulnerable going out later at night.
So the ride is for everyone. So what we say is that the ride is led, organised and marshalled by women, but everyone is most welcome to attend. However, I think the focus is better. I mean, we know that lots of people have had problems on the off-road paths at night, but our focus is for women, and I think if we lose focus, we'll end up diluting the message. And I think it's clearer, it's simpler and clearer to do it like this. Yeah, and it also allows us to challenge issues around the off-road paths being part of the network when they shouldn't be. Yeah, they shouldn't be seen. They're nice to have, but they shouldn't be seen as part of the cycle network in the city. Yeah. So, but I mean, happy to be challenged on that. But I think diluting it means we end up just being like critical mass, and this keeps us separate.
Great. Well, thank you. Well, I think we'll come back to sort of discuss sort of both talks at the end, I think. But Naseem, I know that you might have to leave early. Hi, welcome. Do you want to share a screen?
Yes, please. So thank you for inviting me. My name is Naseem Akhtar. I'm from Saheli Hub, and we have a mission statement, and we try and live by that. I'm going to try and whiz through the first few slides because it's a 21-year history in 10 minutes. So I'm going to try and rush through it quickly. So what we briefly set up because we wanted to do something for women in the area. We're a majority kind of Asian Muslim community. And what we did is we commissioned a feasibility study to find out what women wanted. And they wanted swimming, exercise, fitness and sport. And then we got $500,000 from Sport England, cutting a very long story short, to renovate a facility into a health and wellbeing centre run by and for local women. The first thing we did when we had no money was do a lot of activities for young girls, because young girls from my kind of background didn't have opportunities to do exercise, fitness and sport. So I took girls rock climbing, skiing, canoeing, biking, quad biking. And it was the first times girls from my kind of community learned how to ride a bike with us. We've grown to working at 3 wellbeing centres, 3 GP surgeries and 3 parks. And we deliver a lot of our programmes for free for communities who are the least likely to participate in physical activity and sport. So we celebrate 21 years in 2021, but obviously because of COVID, we couldn't do anything. We run a lot of these activities here, but I want to quickly say that 50% of those who turned up at a GP surgery to do a social club ended up doing a physical activity with us. So that's why we try and engage people to get engaged and then provide something different, because they see someone like them, overweight like them, wear a scarf like them, from the community that they're from, and that encourages them to take part. So our kind of total figures are 1,595 unique participants, 97% are women, 80% from the BAME communities, and I think that says 90% are from the BAME communities, from the poorest BAME communities. So what we started to do, is during COVID, how did we engage? So what we did is there were 7 days of cycling was announced. We told all of our team to go out, take a picture, get back on their bikes, because we're no longer going to sit in because of COVID. And this is the result. And if you want to go up on our our Facebook page, all the films are on there of the girls and the women going out on their bikes. And wherever you see a bike and not person, that's because that person didn't want their picture taken. Okay, so what stops our community from learning to ride a bike? Well, actually, it's the cost of a bike for many families. You know, one bike for one person in a family, it's not going to work. It's for all the family. Just imagine the cost. It's the opportunity. How do you know something's happening locally, where it's happening? The confidence, should I be on a bike in this kind of really built up environment, parked cars, bumps in the road? Seeing is believing. You don't see communities, women like us on a bike. And there's the culture of cycling where it's kind of really male, white male, older, dominated kind of culture. We always provide things as women only, as and when needed. And the key thing that we do is we train up local women to lead local rides. So the Saheli way is we provide the helmets, we provide the bikes, the qualified local instructors. You have to just turn up and join in. And we teach you by teaching you, learn to ride first at 10 o'clock. And if you do well, we move you to 11 o'clock where you learn to ride around the park with confidence. If you do really well, we take you on a lead ride out on the streets, in those kind of streets, to be able to feel confident. And then we take you on long lead rides on a Sunday morning, which is 5, 10, 15, 25 mile rides. And the key challenge I say to people, it's not what you do, it's the way that you do it. And for those of you old enough, that is a Bananarama philosophy. So this is really about, you know, partnerships should be meaningful for organisations like us. We usually get a little bit of money to do this, that and the other, but actually, just imagine the impact if we did this properly on a day-to-day basis. I always say, not for us, not with us, actually develop and grow us. We're a trusted source and anchor organisations. We've been trusted for years. What will take organisations like the big organisation years will take us months. And we're kind of like, talk about, if you don't have that kind of sustainability, if you don't commission us to deliver locally with local people, when the money goes, all those skills go, and actually we'll still live here, so to speak. And I always say, because I believe in it, that women are the key to changing hearts and minds to grow participation. So our group have got to the stage where we have our cycling organisation that takes women, not just out learning how to ride a bike, but actually we started to enter the velo ride, because for 3 years in a row they did it in Ramadan. So the last year, they gave us the last 10 miles as a Ramadan special, because to apologise for doing it in Ramadan 3 years in a row. And we took 25 of those women that you can see in the corner out on a bike, and the City Council, through its Big Bikes Birmingham programme, gave every one of those women a bike. So don't be too impressed with the 73-year-old we taught how to ride a bike, because six weeks later we taught an 85-year-old how to ride a bike. And we did this because she really wanted to learn, but was so scared of balance, we bought our own trikes. And then we've got some of the stories here you might want to see quickly. So we've taught, conservatively estimated, 2,500 women in the old days, because we didn't keep records. 2,500 women have learned how to ride a bike in 14 years with us. We've always done this through ad hoc sessions. We do not have a full-time cycling officer. And so my kind of challenge is, just imagine what we could achieve if we had a dedicated officer to cycling as part of the Saheli Hub team. We are here and willing to change the cycling world. You need to come and talk to us. We know how to do it, and we know how to make it happen. So I'm going to leave it there because I got the 10 minutes and I don't know if I've managed to do that in 10 minutes. So I'll stop sharing.
I wondered how sort of how regularly you're able to hold events if you've only got, you know, if you are doing it in that ad hoc way. Is it a challenge to kind of, or do you just take opportunities when they arise?
Although I say it's ad hoc, actually we've been funded by the Active Wellbeing Society through their LDP programme. So ad hoc in the sense of, we have an organised Saturday ride at one park, and we've used that model from learning to ride, moving to led ride, moving to out on the streets in 3 parks now. So we do a Saturday in a Ward End park. And by the way, we don't mind what background, as long as you're a woman, you can get on a bike. We've had women who travel in from outskirts of Birmingham because they know it's women only. So we do it in, we do this in Ward End Park. We also do this in Calthorpe Park, and we also do this in Handsworth Park. And we've done it in a way where, through the Active Communities programme, we've been able to fund instructors that we've trained and developed and grown, but we don't have an employed, I suppose, is the person. We don't have staff member who does this, but we try and do it in a way whereby we have those regular sessions. So even if you wanted to start, you knew about it, 10 months later, it'll still be there at the same time, in the same place, done by the same instructors, so you don't miss out on that opportunity. And that's how we've stuck by delivering what we do. What we try and do is progression. So we never have people come in and where we say, would you like to do the velo ride? We'll just say, would you like to learn how to ride a bike? That's all we do. And it grows from there, really. It's just they'll see other people like them going out on the street, riding, taking part in events, and then they'll suddenly, can I do that as well? Can I do that? And we'll say, of course you can, join in, get better at riding, see you on Sunday morning. And that's what we try and do.
Yeah, it's that consistency, isn't it? It makes it,
yes,
people know there's going to something's happening at a weekend. It's always an option. Whereas if you have to look up date, or you're never really sure, do you then get kind of, I mean, presumably you get people sort of suggesting it to friends. Do you get sort of that intergenerational?
Oh no, our youngest participants are usually 13, 14, and our oldest, as I said, is 85. We don't discriminate. We've had a woman who was, before the lady on that bike, we had a 70-year-old who'd lived in France all her life, and because of the niqab and hijab debate, she came to England, and at the age of 70, she learned how to ride a bike with us. And our joke was, what postcode shall we put in for you? But, you know, it's really about, for us, it's always been the thrill of being able to, I grew up in a family of boys. I was always sporty. I couldn't understand why other girls weren't sporty. But through the organisation, I've met other tomboys like us. And it's not even tomboys, really. That's kind of, you know, we're our own people. But, you know, we're able to then, inspire others. And we did, when I first took those young girls out, because I was worried about time, I couldn't tell the story of, when I first took the young girls out and I said, what do you want to do? And I took them rock climbing, skiing, canoeing. And they said, oh, we want to do jewellery making, we want to do pottery. And then I took them rock climbing, skiing, canoeing. And then I asked them in the next survey, what would you like to do now? And they said, we want to go quad biking. You know, it's about, you can't raise that aspiration. You can't get people to take part in opportunities if they think it's not for them. It's not on their sphere of thought. It's not a vision they have of themselves. So most of our team, if you told them you'd be teaching women how to ride a bike, cycle, run, swim, you know, all the things we do, they would probably laugh you out of the room saying, oh, no, that's not for me. I don't do things like that. You know, so we've really had to, really work hard to get to where we are, where we're an organised charity. We have a, you know, a £300,000 turnover, but we work with over 2,000 women every single year from the poorest community, the most isolated, least likely to participate. We just know how to do it because the team is from within that community. And so we cover languages, we cover culture, understanding, you know, we just know how to do it. I suppose that's the way it is.
That was really inspiring. I think it's amazing. You've helped so many people take up cycling. I was just reading between the lines on your last slide. Are you fundraising for that full-time officer to support the project?
We need to genuinely, but we've always done it kind of ad hoc. And the reason we've done it ad hoc, we've always tried to fit into the budget that we get. So over the last few years, we've been going beyond that. But it's really weird that whenever our organisation applies, there's always a kind of disbelief that we want to, this is what we really want to do, is this really what we want to do? But actually sport and physical activity and exercise is the medium. So we get women in to do this and then they get confident and they do so much more. So for example, it might be the first time that they get a job, the first time they volunteer, the first time they do some education and training, because that sport, that kind of meeting someone like you, it inspires you to think beyond what your daily unfortunate grind or life is like. So, you know, in many ways, the sport is the medium, but actually what we really do is give women the opportunities to be who they want to be. So if anybody's a wonderful fundraiser, do let me know.
I think it's a highly fundraisable project for sure. Yeah, I feel like I saw an Applica, a grant just this week. If I come across it, I'll send it to you. It sounded like just the ticket, and sadly I've lost the link, but I'll try and find it for you.
No, don't worry. And I think the thing for me is because we're a small charity, I'm the CEO. I'm also the cleaner sometimes. Also the fundraiser. I'm also the accounts person. So there's just so much to do. You know, so for us, it genuinely is that kind of like, how many things can we do? We do the cycling, we do the running, we do the swimming, we take people out in the outdoors, we do that indoor program, we work with people with diabetes. We just secured a culturally appropriate kind of diabetes program where we don't talk about boiled carrots and boiled peas because nobody eats them in my community. So it's how do we you know, make things that are culturally appropriate for the communities that we're serving, and yet we have the highest rates of diabetes. In fact, in Birmingham, if you're an Asian male, you probably will die 10 years sooner than your white counterpart, and you will be ill for 10 years sooner than that white counterpart. So not only will you die sooner, you'll be ill for a lot longer on injections and tablets before you. So those kind of awful things, I feel like I brought the meeting down a bit, sorry everyone, but those kind of things are the things that you know, we grapple with. So and we try and work really hard towards changing, and to do that is because we've got an amazing diet. We've changed the whole of the British public. You know, it's an amazing diet. We love eating what we eat, but it's going to kill you because in Pakistan, India, Bangladesh, etc., you would eat that diet and then you'd work for 8 hours in the field all day, and the next day and the day after that. And here we eat it and then we drive a taxi or a bus, or we sit at our computer. So, you know, we have to work that out, you know.
Sounds like more cycling is the antidote for that.
It's the answer. It's the key to everything.
Yeah.
And actually, I'm at the Canal and River Trust here. We've taken 220 people at bellboat in with the challenge of trying to get 150 out. And we've not only taken the bellboat in, we've taken them out kayaking. You know, so these kind of things grow in our organisation because we've given that stepping stone. So once they get here, they say, well, what about that? And then what about that? And what about that?
Do you find that are there many women who continue to cycle kind of on their own, or do they mainly want to come and cycle in a group?
The majority, even if they cycle, the majority learn to cycle on their own if they have a bike. But if they don't have a bike, they wait all week. And this is the point I'm making. We can only offer certain, because it's so inundated with numbers, we can only offer that kind of one session maybe, or 2 sessions at the most. So those who don't have a bike wait all week for that session. But I will say the majority come for the social first.
That's absolutely brilliant, Naseem.
Sorry, they're going to start the
Even better.
rehearsal. Sorry, go on.
I was just thinking, if you've been going 25 years, presumably some of the girls you've trained are now mums themselves. Are they bringing their daughters along?
Oh, no, younger girls are so much easier for us to get engaged. It's the older women who it's harder, but because of the way we do it, women only, it's culturally appropriate for that community, and that's why 70-year-olds turn up, 60-year-olds turn up, because of that opportunity, really. Really sorry.
No, that's fine. Can I just ask one other? I assume you've had Cycling UK money, but you may not have. But they're doing sort of grants where you can buy bikes.
Yeah.
And I just wonder, add to your collection, really, just put in a bid each time. But you will know all of that, so I'm going to shut up. And well done, brilliant stuff.
Thank you.
In Glasgow, we've got the bike hire scheme, and there are lots of ways that sorts out the absence of bikes for people. We have free bikes available, free bike membership available for job seekers. We have a 95% reduction in the membership charges for people with transport poverty. So, you know, we get the people using the bikes. You've got a bike hire scheme that's just starting to take off in the West Midlands. Have you engaged with them to make it possible for people who want to cycle but haven't got a bike to get access to a well-serviced bike when they need one?
Not at the moment, but we will look into that, because obviously it hasn't. At the moment, we've got the bikes where you're almost paying, I don't know, £7, £8 to hire it, and it may be put in the poorest communities, but it's not the poorest communities who are using them.
Yeah, you had the orange bikes. You had the orange bike scheme in Birmingham.
Yes, those were given away, and we were involved in that giveaway because of the Active Wellbeing Society. And so we were, as a partner, they gave us a certain number of bikes, and we encouraged all the women to take. So a lot of the women have had bikes, but like all things, it was that 1 year and a 2 year, but it's not here in the 3rd and 4th year for the new ones who discover us.
Well, I think there's an issue there which works with Next Bike in Glasgow and Stirling, is they have what they call the Cycling Hub, Bike for Good, Recycle Bike. They have hubs, and the kids who love to play with bikes, because you've got Knives Down, Bikes Up, Bike Storms in London, and Mark has seen, there's a big one that went off in Essex every Sunday. One Sunday a month that I've seen a video of recently. I'm not quite sure whether Mark can tell us where that goes off, but probably a couple of thousand kids and adults piling down some Essex high street on bikes. But the bike hubs, you can attract kids in. We had a 12-year-old, long truancy problems, and he walked in, completely overhauled a bike without any instruction. Now, that kid will not get a job because he's got no academic qualifications, but he makes an excellent car mechanic. And to take these kids, get them City and Guilds training by bringing them in to play with bikes, gets you a resource to maintain the bikes and put more second-hand bikes out. So I'm wondering how we can snowball this.
My experience is when I ran the direct support for cycling program at London Borough of Ealing from about 2001 to 2013, in the latter part, I was organising the overall part of it, but there was management by the agency I employed then, which was Cycle Training UK, unfortunately don't exist anymore. And there was a woman involved there who I allocated funding to. And one of the numerous projects we ran under direct support for cycling was a Asian women's cycling group in Southall. And they would meet once a week, and they would ride around various parts of the borough. And so that was with funding from Transport for London. So I don't know where Ealing are now on that. And in London, TfL has cut cycle training because of their funding situation. However, my suspicion is if you're working with David Cox and Transport for West Midlands or Birmingham City Council, there should be a possibility of getting money from the cycle training budgets to help reach hard to reach communities or communities with special requirements. What would happen, however, is you have to crack more boundaries if you're going to be able to justify the money coming in. And the justification has to be that those women and girls are going to be using their bicycles on an everyday basis. And that's where you start getting in those other problems you mentioned of, like, how do they get to afford a bike, which is going to be a problem for people on low incomes, and where do they store it? Because if they're living in sort of social housing or whatever, is a great big problem of inadequate home cycle parking.
I'm sure David's there. He'll take some notes possibly for me, and anybody I need to speak to, and I'm happy to have a conversation and, you know, see where it goes.
Yeah, thank you very much for joining us. It's really inspirational. Keep up the good work.
Thank you. Really appreciate it. Sorry, I have to run.
Just to let you know, next week we've got Simon Monk and Mark Philpotts, aka Ranty Highwayman, talking to us about well, good enough schemes and not letting perfection be the enemy of the good in terms of delivery of LTN to LTN 120 standards, what we might expect and where we might have to compromise. And Ruth, I'm going to hand over to you for the last word.
I did take part in an International Women's Day ride on Sunday, which was absolutely phenomenal. It was put on by iBike London, and there were significant numbers of us there. And it's still, again, this thing how the report about the vigil in Holborn started with saying 250 cyclists turned up, and I stood there and I looked round and I saw 250 men, women, young people, including lovely Kat Kenyon carrying her 2-month-old baby. And the same on iBike London on Sunday. There were just lots and lots of people cycling. Woman with a hand cycle, woman on a trike, woman in a recumbent because she'd had a stroke. We've really got to get away from this still image about who cycles. And obviously we've just had these examples now, which are phenomenal. But we've all got to keep pushing at this and, you know, try and get the press. They don't talk about cyclists, they talk about a woman or a man or a child. Is just so important, I think. But equally, what was so awesome on Sunday was the fantastic number of people who turned up, who had such a great time pedaling around London. Because it was for Women's Day, the music was all women, and there wasn't enough drum and bass for me. I'd have preferred a bit more hard stuff or hip hop or something like that. But we just have to keep cycling because it is simply the best. Thank you, everybody, for coming.